The great crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched toward the purple sky like the fingers of sleeping gods. Inside the largest tower, 12 beings sat around a table that had seen 10,000 years of galactic history. They called themselves the Galactic Hegemony Council, and they believed they owned the stars. Ambassador Kethfer of the Zephyrian Dominion studied the holographic display floating above the table. It showed a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in the outer rim of the galaxy. The planet's inhabitants had recently achieved faster-than-light travel, though their technology was crude and noisy compared to Council standards. "Humans," Kethfer said, his voice carrying the musical tones of his species. "That is what they call themselves." Another young race stumbling into the void like children playing with fire. The other council members barely looked up from their own displays. They had seen thousands of species take their first steps into space over the millennia. Most burned themselves out within a few centuries. Others learned their place and served the greater galactic order. None had ever challenged the Council's authority. "Their ships are primitive," observed Counselor Vexnari, her crystalline form shifting colors as she spoke. "Fusion drives and chemical weapons. They still use projectile weapons that fire metal slugs. How wonderfully backward." A deep rumble came from the far end of the table. High Arbiter Tholgax, whose rock-like species had ruled star systems before humans had learned to make fire, finally spoke. "They have sent messages requesting an audience. They wish to discuss trade agreements and territorial boundaries." The council chamber filled with what passed for laughter among the various species. The idea that these newcomers thought they could negotiate as equals was amusing to beings who had shaped galactic civilization since before Earth's Ice Age. Territorial boundaries? Kethfer's crest feathers ruffled with mirth. They control one small world around one ordinary star. What territories could they possibly claim? The human delegation had been waiting in the outer chambers for 3 days. The council had made them wait on purpose, a subtle reminder of their place in the galactic order. When they were finally permitted to enter, the humans walked with straight backs and steady eyes that met the gaze of ancient beings without flinching. The lead human introduced himself as Ambassador Marcus Rodriguez. He was tall for his species, with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of a life spent working rather than lounging in comfort. Behind him stood 2 others, a woman in military uniform whose eyes constantly scanned the room, and a younger man whose fingers never stopped moving across a datapad. "Honored Council," Rodriguez began. "We come before you as representatives of humanity. We seek peaceful coexistence and mutual cooperation as we explore the galaxy that we now know we share." The translator devices rendered his words into the various languages of the council species. But the meaning was clear enough. These humans wanted to be treated as equals. The council members exchanged glances that conveyed their shared amusement. "You are welcome in this chamber," Kethfer replied, standing to his full height of nearly 3 meters. His feathered wings spread slightly in a display that had intimidated countless species. "We have reviewed your species development. You have achieved basic interstellar travel, which is commendable." Rodriguez nodded politely, but his expression remained neutral. The woman behind him, General Sarah Chun, according to the files, watched every council member with the focused attention of a predator studying potential threats. "We have prepared a development zone for your species," Kethfer continued, activating a holographic display. It showed the Sol system surrounded by a glowing red boundary. "Your ships may operate freely within this protected development zone. This arrangement has worked well for many species throughout galactic history." The human ambassador studied the display for a long moment. "And beyond this boundary? Beyond this boundary lies the greater galaxy, which requires careful management by those with the wisdom of ages," Tolgax rumbled. Young species often make mistakes that can threaten the stability we have maintained for millennia. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his companions. The young man with the datapad whispered something urgent. General Chun's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "With respect, honored council," Rodriguez said carefully. "Humanity has already identified several uninhabited systems that would be suitable for colonization. These systems contain resources we need to ensure our species' survival." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Several council members leaned forward, their various forms of facial expressions all conveying the same message: displeasure. "Survival is not guaranteed," Vexnari said, her crystalline voice sharp. "It must be earned through wisdom and restraint. Many species have destroyed themselves by expanding too quickly. We prevent such tragedies by keeping us trapped in one star system?" The question came from General Chun, who had stepped forward despite protocol. The chamber fell silent. No species had ever spoken to the council in such a tone. Kethver's feathers flattened against his skull in a sign of rising anger. "You are not trapped," he said slowly. "You are protected. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. There are forces at work that your young species cannot comprehend. The protected development zone ensures your survival. And if we choose to leave this zone?" Rodriguez asked that the question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the table, beings older than human civilization stirred with barely contained outrage. How dare these newcomers question the wisdom of ages? Such choices would be unwise, Tholgax replied, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "The Council has a responsibility to maintain galactic peace. We have tools to ensure that responsibility is met." The humans stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the threat. Rodriguez finally nodded slowly. "We understand your position, Honored Council. We will convey your decision to our leaders." "See that you do," Kethver said, dismissing them with a wave of his wing. "And remind them that the galaxy has an order that has existed since before your species drew breath. That order will continue long after you have returned to dust." As the humans left the chamber, none of the council members paid them much attention. They returned to their discussions of truly important matters: trade disputes between ancient civilizations, and territorial adjustments that affected entire sectors. None of them noticed the way General Chun memorized every detail of the chamber's layout. None of them saw the young man's datapad recording energy signatures and defensive measures. None of them recognized the look in Ambassador Rodriguez's eyes as he made his final bow. It was the look of a man who had just been told that his children had no future among the stars. It was the look of a species that had been caged by beings who thought themselves gods. In the weeks that followed, the Council received humanity's official response. Earth would comply with the protected development zone restrictions. Human ships would remain within the boundaries that had been set. There would be no unauthorized expansion. The Council was satisfied. Another young species had learned its place in the galactic order. They turned their attention to other matters, confident that humanity would eventually fade into irrelevance. Like so many others before them, they never imagined that in the depths of space around Sol, human engineers were already working around the clock, studying every piece of alien technology they had encountered. They never suspected that human minds, shaped by millennia of warfare and competition, were analyzing Council weaknesses with the focused intensity of a species that had never learned to accept defeat. The Council had made their first mistake. They had underestimated humanity. It would not be their last. 3 years had passed since the Council delivered their decree to humanity. 3 years of apparent compliance, of human ships staying within their designated boundaries, while the galaxy continued its ancient rhythms. The Council had almost forgotten about the small blue world and its ambitious inhabitants. Admiral Vexnari floated in her command chamber aboard the dreadnought Eternal Judgment, watching the stars wheel pass through the crystal viewport. Her crystalline body shifted from blue to purple as she contemplated the tedious mission ahead. The 47th Enforcement Fleet, 3 dreadnoughts and a dozen support vessels, was responding to reports of unauthorized human activity near Proxima Centauri. "Admiral," her communications officer chimed. "We have visual contact with the human vessels." The main display activated, showing a cluster of ships moving slowly through the void. They were crude things by Council standards. Blocky hulls marked with scorch patterns from atmospheric entry, fusion drives that glowed like tiny suns, and weapon systems that looked like they belonged in a museum. "How many?" Vexnari asked, though she wasn't particularly concerned. Human military technology was centuries behind Council standards. 7 vessels total. 5 appear to be colony ships, large, slow-moving transports. 2 are escorts, smaller and more maneuverable. They're heading for the 4th planet in the Proxima system. Vexnari's color shifted to an angry red. The audacity was remarkable. These humans had been given clear boundaries. Yet here they were, flagrantly violating the protected development zone, as if the Council's words meant nothing. "Open a communication channel," she commanded. The largest human ship appeared on screen, a massive transport called New Horizons. Its hull was marked with the flags of dozens of Earth nations, and through the transparent sections, Vexnari could see movement inside. Thousands of life signs registered on her sensors. Men, women, children, an entire community planning to start fresh on an alien world. A human face appeared on the communication display. Captain Elena Vasquez, according to the identification beacon. She was middle-aged with tired eyes but a determined expression that reminded Vexnari unpleasantly of the ambassador who had stood before the Council 3 years ago. "This is Captain Vasquez of the colony ship New Horizons," the human said. "We're on a peaceful mission to establish a settlement on Proxima Centauri B. We request safe passage." "This is Admiral Vexnari of the Council Enforcement Fleet," she replied, her voice carrying the authority of 10 millennia of galactic order. "You are in violation of the protected development zone established for your species. You will return to Sol System immediately." Captain Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Behind her, Vexnari could see other humans moving about their duties, engineers monitoring systems. Families gathered around viewing ports to catch their first glimpse of their new home. Children playing in the corridors. "Admiral, we cannot return to Sol," Vasquez said finally. "Earth is overcrowded. Our population is reaching critical levels. We need living space, new resources. This system is uninhabited. We're not threatening anyone. The galaxy's resources are managed by those with the wisdom to use them properly," Vexnari replied. "Young species lack the experience to make such decisions. The Council's judgment in this matter is final." "Please," another voice called from the human ship. A younger man stepped into view, probably the colony's leader or governor. "We have 50,000 people aboard these ships. Families, children, scientists, workers. We're not soldiers or conquerors. We just want a chance to build something new." Vexnari felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy in another species. But her people had learned long ago that sentiment was a luxury the galaxy could not afford. Order required discipline. Discipline required examples. "You have been warned," she said. "Depart immediately or face the consequences." The human ships held their course. On her sensors, Vexnari could see the 2 escort vessels, destroyers, the humans called them, moving to flank positions around the colony ships. Brave, perhaps, but utterly futile. The escort ships carried maybe a dozen missiles each, while her dreadnought alone mounted weapons that could crack a planet's crust. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "the human escorts are powering weapons. Primitive nuclear missiles and kinetic projectiles. No threat to our shields. Are they truly going to fight?" Vaxnari wondered aloud. They must know they cannot win. But the human ships continued their approach to Proxima Centauri b, and their escorts maintained their defensive positions. Clearly, these creatures valued their pride more than their survival. "Target the lead colony ship," Vaxnari ordered. "One demonstration should be sufficient." "Admiral," her communications officer interrupted. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. Captain Vasquez is speaking. We know we can't win this fight." Vasquez's voice crackled across the void. "But we won't turn back. Our children deserve a future among the stars. If you want to stop us, you'll have to murder 50,000 innocent people. The choice is yours." The bridge fell silent. Even by council standards, killing that many sentients was a significant action. Most species faced with such overwhelming force would simply surrender. These humans seemed prepared to die for the right to plant crops on an empty world. "They're bluffing," Vaxnari decided. "No species is truly willing to sacrifice so many lives for so little gain. Fire a warning shot across their bow. Once they see our weapons in action, they'll surrender." The Eternal Judgment's main plasma cannon discharged, sending a bolt of stellar fire past the New Horizons. The energy release lit up the Proxima system like a second sun. Any rational species would have immediately changed course. The human ships kept coming. "They're insane," Vaxnari's tactical officer whispered. "They're actually going to make us kill them all." "Then that is their choice," Vaxnari replied, though her crystalline form had shifted to a troubled purple. "Target the New Horizons. Full power." And this. The plasma cannon charged again, its energy readings climbing to lethal levels. On the main display, the New Horizons continued its steady approach to the planet below, where humans had dreamed of building new cities under an alien sun. "Admiral," the communications officer said urgently, "they're broadcasting again." This time, it wasn't Captain Vasquez. It was a child, a little girl maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and curious eyes. She was holding a small toy and standing next to what was probably her mother. "Hello," the girl said, waving at the camera. "Mama says we're going to live on a new planet with purple grass and 2 suns. I can't wait to see it. I hope the aliens there are nice." The bridge fell completely silent. Several officers looked away from their displays. Vaxnari felt something crack inside her crystalline structure, a sensation she hadn't experienced in centuries, but the Council's orders were clear. The galactic order had to be maintained. Young species had to learn their place, and examples, once begun, had to be completed or they lost all meaning. "Fire," she whispered. The plasma bolt struck the New Horizons amidships, punching through its crude armor like paper. The ship's fusion reactor went critical, creating a brief star that outshone Proxima Centauri itself. When the light faded, there was nothing left but expanding debris and the cooling plasma of 50,000 human lives. The escort ships immediately opened fire, their primitive missiles streaking toward the Council fleet. The weapons detonated harmlessly against shields designed to withstand stellar phenomena. It was like insects attacking a mountain. Captain Sarah Chun of the destroyer, Indomitable, appeared on the communication channel. Her face was twisted with rage and grief, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You murdered children," she screamed. "You killed families. You monsters, you killed innocent people." "We maintained galactic order," Vaxnari replied, but the words felt hollow. "Return to Sol System and this ends." Instead, the Indomitable changed course, accelerating directly toward the Eternal Judgment. Its engines glowed brighter and brighter as the ship pushed beyond safe parameters. "She's going to ram us," the tactical officer reported. "Her reactor is overloading. She's going to take us with her." Vexnari watched the small human ship growing larger on the display. Captain Chun stood on her bridge, hands locked on her command chair, staring death in the face with absolute determination. "Destroy her," Vexnari ordered. The defensive batteries opened fire, but Chun had plotted her course well. The Indomitable wove between the energy beams like a dancer, her hull glowing from near misses, but holding together through sheer human stubbornness. At the last second, Chun's ship collided with the Council cruiser. Divine will. The combined explosion of both reactors created a fireball that painted the Proxima system in shades of vengeance. When it faded, both ships were gone. The remaining human escort vessel was destroyed moments later, but not before transmitting everything back toward Sol System. Every detail of the battle, every moment of the massacre, every second of the Council's lesson was beamed across space at the speed of light. The 47th Enforcement Fleet regrouped and departed, leaving the Proxima System to its ancient silence. On the bridge of the Eternal Judgment, Admiral Vexnari stared at the debris field where the New Horizons had died. "Mission accomplished," her communications officer reported. "All human vessels destroyed. The violation has been corrected." The transmission from Proxima Centauri reached Earth 37. Hours after the massacre, Dr. Amanda Foster was working late in her laboratory at the Lunar Research Station when the priority alert flashed across her screen. She expected another routine report about mineral surveys or equipment malfunctions. Instead, she found herself watching 50,000 human beings die in a flash of alien fire. The recording showed everything. The Council ships appearing like harbingers of death. Admiral Vexnari's cold dismissal of human pleas. The little girl waving at the camera, excited about her new home with purple grass. The moment when the New Horizons became a brief star in the darkness. Captain Chun's final desperate charge into the enemy fleet. Dr. Foster sat in stunned silence as the recording ended. Then she began to cry, not just for the dead colonists, but for the innocents that had died with them. For 3 years, humanity had believed they could find their place in the galaxy through diplomacy and patience. In 30 seconds of plasma fire, the Council had taught them a different lesson. Within hours, the recordings were transmitted to every human settlement, every news network, every government on Earth and throughout Sol System. The reaction was immediate and terrible in its unity. Political parties that had opposed each other for decades suddenly spoke with one voice. Corporate rivals shared their most sensitive technologies. Military forces that had trained to fight each other began coordinating as a single organism. President Maria Santos addressed the United Nations Emergency Assembly 6 hours after the transmission arrived. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she gripped the podium. "Citizens of Earth and all human settlements," she began, "we have seen the true face of those who call themselves our guardians. They murdered our children for the crime of seeking new homes. They destroyed innocent lives to preserve their ancient tyranny. Today, we declared that humanity will no longer bow to alien masters." The vote was unanimous. Every nation, every corporation, every organization committed their full resources to a single goal. Earth's governments dissolved their armies into a unified human defense force. Corporations opened their vaults and shared technologies they had guarded for decades. Scientists who had spent their careers in competition began working together as if their species' survival depended on it, because it did. Dr. Elena Vasquez, sister of the murdered. Captain Elena Vasquez led the most important project. Hidden in asteroid mining stations throughout the outer solar system, teams of human engineers worked to understand every piece of Council technology they had encountered. They had been studying alien artifacts in secret for years. But now their work took on desperate urgency. The Council ships use plasma weapons, Dr. Vasquez explained to the assembled scientists and military officers. Powerful, but they require enormous energy and have predictable firing patterns. Their shields are designed to stop other plasma weapons and particle beams, not kinetic projectiles. Admiral Jackson Hayes, the newly appointed head of Human Defense Forces, leaned forward. He was a stern man with gray hair and scars from the resource wars of the 2040s. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying they're fighting the last war," Vasquez replied. "Their weapons and defenses are designed to fight other Council species. They've never faced an enemy that uses our kind of technology. The humans had found their first advantage. While the Council relied on energy weapons, humanity had perfected projectile weapons over millennia of warfare. Railguns that could accelerate metal slugs to incredible speeds. Kinetic missiles that struck with the force of meteors. Nuclear weapons that didn't depend on exotic particles or energy fields. But weapons were only part of the equation. The humans needed ships, and they needed them fast. In the shipyards of Earth, Luna, and Mars, construction began on vessels unlike anything humanity had ever built. The designs incorporated Council technology stolen and reverse-engineered over 3 years of secret study. But the ships were uniquely human in their purpose. They were built not to explore or transport, but to kill. The new destroyers were sleek and angular, designed for speed and stealth. They mounted railguns that could punch through Council armor, and their hulls were coated with materials that absorbed sensor sweeps. The cruisers were larger and more heavily armed, built around massive, kinetic cannons that could strike targets at impossible ranges. But the crown jewel of human shipbuilding was the new class of dreadnoughts. These massive vessels mounted weapons that Council engineers would have considered impossible, gravity-focused. Kinetic bombardment systems that could accelerate projectiles to near light speed. While the ships were being built, another kind of war was already beginning. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb led the first of the ghost teams, small groups of humans in stealth ships who slipped through Council space like deadly shadows. Remember, Webb told his team as they prepared for their first mission, "We're not here to win battles. We're here to learn everything about how they think, how they fight, how they die." The ghost teams infiltrated Council space with a stealth technology that the aliens couldn't detect. Human engineers had cracked the secret of Council sensors and built ships that were essentially invisible to their scanners. These small vessels carried teams of soldiers, spies, and saboteurs deep into enemy territory. Council supply convoys began disappearing without explanation. Remote outposts went silent. Their crews found dead at their posts with no signs of external attack. Communication relays suffered, mysterious failures that left entire sectors cut off from central command. The Council investigated each incident, but they found no evidence of human involvement. According to their sensors, no human ships had left Sol System. Their probe vessels reported that Earth's forces were still busy with construction projects and military exercises within there. Designated Zone. What they didn't know was that human hackers had penetrated their surveillance networks months earlier. Every Council probe that entered Sol System was fed carefully crafted false data, showing exactly what the aliens expected to see: humans staying within their boundaries, building defensive installations, apparently accepting their place as a minor species. Dr. Sarah Kim led the Cyber Warfare Division from a hidden facility beneath the Sahara Desert. Her screen showed real-time data from Council networks across the galaxy. Fleet positions, supply schedules, military capabilities, political discussions, all of it flowed into human databases where analysts worked around the clock to find weaknesses. "We know more about their military than they do," Dr. Kim reported to Admiral Hayes during one of their weekly briefings. Their command structure is rigid and hierarchical. Orders flow from the top down with no room for initiative. Their fleet commanders haven't fought a real war in over 1,000 years. The information was invaluable, but it came with a terrible realization. The Council's military force was vast. Tens of thousands of ships spread across hundreds of systems. Even with their technological advantages, humanity would be outnumbered by ratios. That made victory seem impossible. That was when the human leadership made a decision that would have horrified their ancestors. They would not fight a defensive war. They would not wait for the Council to attack Earth. They would strike first with overwhelming force. At targets chosen to cause maximum damage to Council morale and capability. In the war rooms of Earth, military planners worked with scientists to identify the most effective targets. Not just military installations, but the symbolic heart of Council power. The ancient worlds where the ruling species had governed for millennia. The sacred sites where they conducted their most important ceremonies. The economic centers that funded their vast empire. We're going to hurt them in ways they never imagined, Admiral Hayes explained to his senior staff. They think of war as a tool for maintaining order. We're going to show them what war really means. The first human strike fleets began assembling in the outer solar system, hidden from Council sensors by the same stealth technology that concealed the ghost teams. Thousands of ships, destroyers, cruisers, and the new dreadnoughts gathered in the darkness between planets. Each fleet was assigned specific targets based on the intelligence gathered by the ghost teams. They would strike simultaneously across dozens of systems, hitting the Council so hard and fast that their ancient command structure would collapse under the shock. But the humans had learned something else from their years of studying Council psychology. These aliens thought of themselves as natural rulers, superior beings who governed lesser species for their own good. They had never been seriously challenged, never faced an enemy that refused to acknowledge their authority. The ghost teams had identified Council leaders throughout the galaxy, governors, admirals, high officials who believed themselves untouchable. Human assassins were already moving into position, preparing to eliminate the enemy command structure at the moment when the main fleets struck. As the final preparations continued, President Santos issued a secret message to human forces throughout Sol System. It was simple and direct. They shed our blood. They murdered our children. They thought they could cage humanity and keep us as pets. Tomorrow, we show them what happens when you corner a species that learned to survive by conquering its own world. We go to war not as explorers or diplomats. Admiral Jackson Hayes stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, watching the stars wheel past as his fleet moved through hyperspace toward their target. 18 months had passed since Proxima, and today humanity would finally answer for the blood that had been spilled. Around him, the largest fleet humans had ever assembled moved in perfect formation. 200 ships armed with weapons the Council had never imagined. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "All strike fleets are in position." Ghost teams confirmed that Council forces are still following their regular patrol patterns. They have no idea we're coming. Hayes nodded grimly. In 12 systems across the galaxy, human fleets were preparing to strike simultaneously at the heart of Council power. The targets had been chosen carefully: military shipyards, command centers, and the home worlds of the most arrogant Council species. "Send the message to Earth," Hayes ordered. "All fleets, execute on my mark." The transmission that followed was brief and direct. It showed Admiral Hayes standing before a display of the human fleet, his face carved from stone and his eyes burning with the fury of an entire species. "Council of Tyrants," he began. 18 months ago, you murdered 50,000 innocent humans to teach us our place in your galactic order. Today, we return that lesson with interest. You shed our blood. Now face the consequences." The transmission cut to images of human shipyards where thousands of warships had been built for this moment. Dreadnoughts whose main guns could crack planets. Cruisers armed with kinetic weapons that struck like the fist of an angry god. Destroyers so fast and stealthy that Council sensors couldn't track them. "We asked only for room to grow," Hayes continued. "You chose to cut us down. Now reap what you have sown." The transmission ended, and the attack began. In the Zephyrian home system, Ketfer was enjoying his morning ritual when the first human ships materialized out of hyperspace. He had been feeding the crystal fish in his private lake, watching them dance through the clear water while discussing poetry with his aide. The attack sirens caught him completely off guard. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" he demanded as guards rushed into his garden. "Admiral, human ships have appeared throughout the system," his aide gasped. "They're attacking our naval facilities." Ketfer's feathers flattened in disbelief. "Impossible. Human ships cannot reach this system. Our sensors would have detected them days before arrival." But the evidence was right there on the tactical display. Dozens of human warships were systematically destroying every Council military installation in the system. Their weapons were unlike anything in Council databases. Projectile weapons that moved faster than energy sensors could track, missiles that ignored defensive shields, and kinetic bombardment, systems that struck targets with devastating precision. The Retribution led the attack on the main shipyard complex where the Council built their dreadnoughts. Hayes watched as his kinetic cannons hurled steel projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The Council's energy shields, designed to stop plasma and particle beams, offered no protection against solid matter moving at such impossible velocities. The shipyard's defensive batteries returned fire, but their plasma bolts struck empty space. Human ships moved with an agility that seemed to mock the laws of physics, dodging between energy beams while their own weapons found their targets with mechanical precision. "Target the command center," Hayes ordered. "I want to send a personal message to whoever's in charge here." The main gun of the Retribution charged for 30 seconds before firing a single projectile. The tungsten rod, accelerated to 20% of light speed, punched through the shipyard's armored command center like it was made of paper. The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit. Similar scenes played out across a dozen Council systems. Human fleets appeared without warning, struck with devastating effectiveness, and vanished before Council reinforcements could arrive. They fought with a precision and brutality that shocked even hardened Council military veterans. But the ship attacks were only part of the human plan. On Nexus Prime, High Arbiter Tholgax was addressing the emergency Council session when the lights flickered. The ancient being paused in his speech about mobilizing the Grand Armada, his rock-like features showing concern. "Technical difficulties," he rumbled. "The staff will resolve." The lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in moments later, but the damage was done. In those few seconds of darkness, human infiltrators had moved through the Council chambers like ghosts, completing missions they had planned for months. When the lights returned, 3 Council members were dead at their seats. Poison delivered through weapons so small that Council security hadn't detected them. The remaining Council members stared at their fallen colleagues in shock, finally understanding that they were not untouchable gods governing lesser beings. They were targets. Similar assassinations occurred throughout Council space. Governors, admirals, high officials, anyone who had supported the Proxima massacre found themselves marked for death. Human assassins struck without warning, used weapons that left no trace, and disappeared into the shadows before security forces could respond. Admiral Vexnari received word of the attacks while reviewing defensive preparations for her home system. The crystal being had been haunted by nightmares of that little human girl ever since Proxima, and now those nightmares were becoming reality. "Admiral," her aide reported, Human forces have appeared in 7 sectors. Their ships, they're not like anything in our databases. Our weapons can barely scratch them, but their projectile weapons are tearing through our defenses like tissue. Vexnari studied the tactical reports with growing horror. Human ships were faster than Council vessels, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter Council technology. Worse, they fought with a coordination that her rigid command structure couldn't match. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "Our intelligence reports showed them building defensive installations in Sol System. Where did these fleets come from?" Her aide pulled up surveillance data from the past year. Every Council probe that had entered Sol System had reported the same thing: human forces staying within their boundaries, focusing on defensive preparations, apparently resigned to their restricted status. The reports were falsified. Vexnari realized with growing dread. They've been feeding us lies while building an invasion fleet, but how? Our sensors would have detected such construction. The answer was terrifying in its simplicity. Human technology had advanced beyond Council understanding. Their stealth capabilities, their weapons, their ships, everything was based on principles that Council science had never encountered. They hadn't just built a fleet. They had revolutionized the art of war. At the Battle of Kepler Station, Fleet Commander Zarneth learned firsthand what human warfare meant. His sector fleet of 37 ships had been patrolling the outer rim when human forces appeared. He had expected an easy victory against primitive newcomers. Instead, he found himself fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. Human destroyers danced between his battleships, their railguns punching holes through armor that had protected Council vessels for centuries. Human cruisers struck from impossible angles, their kinetic missiles ignoring defensive shields to deliver nuclear fire directly to ship hulls. "All ships, concentrate fire on the late human vessel," Zarneth ordered, watching as his fleet's plasma cannons focused on a single human dreadnought. The energy beam struck home, but the human ship's armor was unlike anything in Council databases. Instead of vaporizing under plasma fire, it absorbed the energy and redirected it through cooling systems that glowed like red-hot veins across the hull. The human response was devastating. Every ship in Zarneth's fleet found itself targeted simultaneously by weapons they couldn't track or intercept. Kinetic rounds struck with the force of meteors. Nuclear warheads detonated against hulls designed to withstand energy weapons, but helpless against crude explosive force. In 12 minutes, Zarneth's entire fleet was destroyed. The human ships departed without a word, leaving only debris and the bitter knowledge that the galactic order had changed forever. Back on Nexus Prime, the surviving Council members struggled to comprehend the magnitude of their situation. In 6 hours, human forces had destroyed more Council ships than had been lost in the previous 1,000 years. Their ancient naval bases lay in ruins. Their most secure systems had been violated by enemies who appeared and vanished like evil spirits. "They fight like monsters," whispered Counselor Ithlara, her insectoid form trembling with fear. "No regard for honor, no respect for the traditional rules of warfare. They strike without warning and show no mercy." High Arbiter Tholgax, one of the few Council leaders to survive the assassination attempts, studied the tactical reports with mounting despair. "It's worse than that. They fight like humans. We thought we understood them, emotional, impulsive, prone to self-destruction. We were wrong. They are emotional, but they have turned that emotion into a weapon." The truth was becoming clear to the Council survivors. They had not simply awakened a sleeping military power. They had created an enemy specifically designed to destroy them. Human weapons targeted Council weaknesses. 2 years had passed since the war began, and the ancient crystal towers of Nexus Prime stood like tombstones over a dying empire. High Arbiter Tholgax gazed through the transparent walls of the emergency council chamber at the orbital shipyards, where the last remnants of the Grand Armada were being repaired. Of the 12 species that had once ruled the galaxy, only 6 governments still existed. The humans had been thorough in their work. The Zephyrian Dominion was gone. Its homeworlds turned to radioactive wastelands by human kinetic bombardment. The crystalline hierarchy had surrendered after their population centers were systematically destroyed by weapons that turned their mineral bodies to dust. The void swimmers had simply vanished, their deep space habitats abandoned after human ghost fleets hunted them through the cosmic dark. Reports from the outer rim sectors, announced Counselor Ithlara, her insectoid voice trembling with exhaustion. The human fleets have destroyed our last supply bases in the Kepler region. Our forces there are requesting permission to withdraw. Withdraw to where? Asked Admiral Vexnari bitterly. Her crystalline form had shifted to a dull gray, the color of defeat and despair. They control the space lanes. They know our supply routes better than we do. Every time we try to regroup, they appear out of nowhere and destroy us. Tholgax studied the tactical display with the patience of a being who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. The human strategy was becoming clear. They weren't trying to conquer Council territory. They were methodically eliminating the Council's ability to wage war, destroying military assets, infrastructure, and leadership while leaving civilian populations mostly untouched. It was precise, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. There's worse news, Ithlara continued. Our intelligence services report that human infiltration teams have been active on our remaining core worlds. Government officials, military commanders, civil engineers, anyone involved in the war effort is being systematically eliminated. The surviving council members sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of their situation. They had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia through superior technology, ancient wisdom, and the simple assumption that newer species would naturally defer to their authority. The humans had shattered all of those assumptions with weapons that turned matter into energy and tactics that seemed to bend space and time itself. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Maidala of the Ethereal Consortium, it is time to consider accommodation. The humans have proven their point. Surely they can be reasoned with. Reasoned with? Vexnari's voice cracked with bitter laughter. They don't want to negotiate. They want to erase us. Every message we've sent has been ignored. Every diplomatic overture has been met with silence. They're not interested in ruling the galaxy. They want to make sure no one can rule it except them. The truth was more complex than Vexnari realized. In the depths of space near Sol System, Admiral Jackson Hayes stood in the war room of humanity's most advanced command ship, studying intelligence reports that would have terrified the Council if they had known their contents. The final phase is ready for implementation, reported General Sarah Chun, the woman who had taken command of human ground forces after her sister's death at Proxima. All Council core worlds are under surveillance. Their remaining fleets are tracked in real time. We can end this war in a matter of hours. Hayes nodded, but his expression was troubled. 2 years of warfare had transformed humanity in ways that disturbed him. They had become efficient killers, masters of violence and destruction. Earth's children now grew up learning the names of alien enemies before they learned to read. Human scientists had devoted their careers to developing new ways to end lives rather than improve them. The Council has sent another message, Chung continued. They're requesting a ceasefire and formal negotiations. Terms? Hayes asked, though he already knew the answer. Complete surrender. Dismantling of all Council military forces. Trial of war criminals responsible for Proxima. Return of all human technology acquired during the war. And recognition of humanity as the galaxy's dominant military power. The terms were harsh but fair by human standards. They had lost 50,000 innocents to Council pride. In return, they had eliminated 6 species' capacity for warfare and reduced the galactic government to a handful of refugees hiding behind increasingly fragile defenses. And the response? Chun's expression hardened. They reject our terms. High Arbiter Tholgax sent a personal message. He says the Council would rather die than submit to barbaric newcomers who understand only violence. Hayes sighed. He had hoped that the Council would choose survival over pride, but apparently 10,000 years of absolute power had made them incapable of accepting defeat. They would fight to the end, forcing humanity to complete the job they had started at Proxima. Implement final solution, he ordered quietly. All units, commence Operation Extinction. On Nexus Prime, Tolgax was addressing the last meeting of the Galactic Hegemony Council when the first alarms began to sound. The Ancient being paused in his speech about the sacred duty to resist human tyranny, his massive head turning toward the tactical displays. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Ships," whispered Admiral Vexnari, staring at her sensors in disbelief. "Human ships everywhere. They're decloaking around the entire planet. The orbital defense grid, rebuilt and reinforced over the past 2 years, opened fire immediately. Plasma cannons and particle beams lashed out at the human fleet, creating a light show that could be seen from the planet's surface. For a moment, it seemed that the defenses might hold. Then the human ships returned fire. The kinetic bombardment was unlike anything the Council had experienced. Projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed struck the defensive platforms with the force of nuclear weapons. But these weren't random attacks. Each shot was precisely calculated to cause cascading failures in the defense network. Within minutes, the orbital defenses were gone. "Impossible," Tolgax rumbled. "We had advance warning of their approach. Our sensors showed empty space. How did they get so close without detection?" The answer was terrifyingly simple. Human technology had advanced beyond Council understanding. Their stealth systems didn't just hide from sensors. They actively fooled them, feeding false data that showed exactly what the defenders expected to see until the moment when deception was no longer necessary. Admiral Hayes appeared on the Council's communication system, his image filling the chamber's main display. He looked older than when the war had begun, his hair completely gray and his eyes holding the weight of hard decisions. "High Arbiter Tholgax," he said formally, "this is your final opportunity to surrender. Lay down your arms, and your people will be treated according to the laws of war. Refuse, and we will do what must be done." Tolgax drew himself up to his full height, every inch the ruler of a galactic empire. "We will not bow to murderers and barbarians. The Council has guided this galaxy since before your species learned to make fire. That sacred duty does not end because you have learned to kill efficiently." Hayes nodded as if he had expected this response. "Then you have chosen extinction. I'm sorry it has come to this." The transmission cut, and the final battle for Nexus Prime began. Human ground forces materialized in the Council chamber itself, their advanced teleportation technology bypassing every defensive measure. The soldiers moved with mechanical precision, their weapons trained on each remaining Council member. "By the authority of the Human Defense Forces," announced the team leader, "you are all under arrest for crimes against humanity. Specifically, the murder of 50,000 innocent civilians at Proxima Centauri." Several Council members tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Human forces had taken control of every exit, every communication system, every means of escape. The ancient rulers of the galaxy found themselves prisoners in their own capital. "This is not justice," Tholgax declared. "This is revenge." The human officer removed his helmet, revealing a young face marked by years of war. "You're right," he said quietly. "This is revenge. You killed our families to maintain your power. Now we're ending your power to prevent you from killing more families." The trials that followed were swift and thorough. The evidence of the Council's crimes was presented with devastating efficiency. Not just Proxima, but centuries of oppression, the casual destruction of species that refused to submit, the systematic suppression of any civilization that might challenge Council authority. The sentences were equally swift. Some Council members were executed for their direct involvement in atrocities. Others were exiled to distant worlds where they could spend their remaining years, contemplating the consequences of absolute power. A few who had opposed the violence were pardoned but stripped of all authority. When it was over, the Galactic Hegemony Council existed only in history books. Admiral Hayes stood alone on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as human fleets spread throughout the galaxy to secure former Council territories. Around him, officers coordinated the transfer of power from ancient alien bureaucracies to human military governors. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from over 200 systems. Most are asking for protection from pirate raids and local conflicts." Hayes wasn't surprised.